Perfect. All right. Welcome to official class. It's only 6:35, so this is going to be an awesome class. Hopefully no one has to leave before 11. So this is the tenant screening process. I'm almost going to guarantee you, because of that, class will run a little bit long. If you have to leave towards the end, no big deal. We won't lock you in or anything. So next week, James is teaching just one more rental property. I'm guessing this is about adding 7 more rental properties to your portfolio?
No, it's really the difference that adding a single rental property makes in a bunch of different scenarios. So you'll see, if you're thinking, should I buy one more? I'll show you the math to show you what it means in terms of cash flow and net worth at various stages and in various situations.
Perfect. The following week, I'm basically teaching you how to screen tenants without going to jail. So tonight is about screening tenants. 2 weeks from now, we'll teach a little bit more, and then you get to practice. So if you really want to know how to screen tenants and you want to be great at it when you're protecting your own property, don't miss that class. James, you're teaching the next one, which is how to get the best property manager to work for you. What's this about?
It is about all the different ways that property managers make money, how to think about property managers, criteria for selecting property managers, interview questions for property managers. So if you're considering hiring a property manager, this is the class to come to, where I'll slow down and go into detail about all the things to consider and what to think about when selecting a property manager.
Yep, and so the last time James taught that class, we paired it with this next class, which is getting your property manager to work harder for you. This is all about, now you've hired your property manager, how do you get the most out of them, right? And what do you need to do in order to manage them? This game is not, hey, I've hired a property manager, I never have to pay attention to my properties. It's, I hired a property manager and now I have to manage my property manager. So this is how to do that. Last time when we did these, it was a really long class, so we broke it into 2 this year so we can spend more time answering questions.
And we didn't even cover everything we wanted to.
Yeah,
cut some stuff out.
No doubt. Yeah, we had to speed up. So this is the tenant screening process tonight, or fill your vacant rentals the right way, or how to avoid losing loads of money, or the most important thing you can do to protect your investment, which is really my favorite title, right? When you go and buy a piece of property, the number one thing you can do after you've bought it to protect your investment is to make sure that you put the right person in the property, right? Who's going to pay rent, who's going to take care of the property, who's not going to, just disappear, they're going to fulfill their obligations, right? This is the number one thing you can do to protect your investment. If I gave any of you a sledgehammer and put you in any single house and gave you 5 minutes, how much dollar-wise damage do you think you could do? How much? This is class participation. If you guys are all quiet tonight, it won't go well. So 100,000. That's a higher number than I feel like I could do, but you could probably get there, right? I mean, she's clearly stronger than I am swinging the sledgehammer. I mean, 30,000 is like my easy number. Like probably in 60 seconds, you could probably do 30,000 in damage, right? Depending on what your house looks like, right? If it has hardwoods or granite, smash the granite and break that. There's 5 to 8K right there, right? I mean, and then a few sinks, some cabinets, the floor, it really adds up quick.
I think what you do is you put the sledgehammer down, you smoke some meth in there, and I think that's...
The mic was off when you said that, right? Oh, man. Jeez. And thank you for coming to class, for deleting the recording. Oh, man. Do not do that. Jeez. Meth does not come up. So, introductions. We're mostly going to skip these. So, everybody stand up, turn to the person on your left, the person on your right. Take 2 minutes to introduce yourself. Yeah. Well, somebody has to go to the... All right, so that's 2 minutes. Time's up. Perfect. So I was going to have you answer these questions, which we did last time, which is really informative because we get to get a feeling of what's the hardest part of screening a tenant for you, and how many tenants have you screened. So if you've screened more than 1 tenant or 1 tenant, put your hand up, and then keep them up. If you've screened 5 tenants, 10 tenants, 15, 20, 25, 100. Yeah. Yeah. I'm fairly sure that I have 100 applications in my folder.
Oh my God.
Filled out applications?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like play stuff in your
Oh, no. Yeah, just how many of you screen? So really quick, for those of you that screen tenants or haven't screened tenants but are like, oh man, the one thing I'm scared of, what is the hardest part about screening a tenant for you? Just shout them out.
Not going to jail.
Not going to jail. Okay, good enough.
Believing what they tell you.
Yeah, don't believe, trust but verify. Okay, what else?
Time.
Time? Takes time to screen a tenant. What are you guys scared of when you screen tenants other than getting locked up?
Emotional support animals.
Emotion, yep, we'll talk about that tonight. Yep, those are really tough. And I don't have good answers on that one tonight. We're waiting on the courts, essentially, to decide some stuff.
Making sure you avoid the professional tenants.
Making sure you avoid professional tenants. So those tenants who know exactly what to say, what to write down, and they get in your property, and then they know how to play the game where they stop paying rent and they make it really hard for you to get rid of them for more than a month or two, right? So what else? Anything else?
Having to take less than desirable tenant just because we meet the criteria when you got right behind of a better tenant.
Yeah, so Denise says, having to take a less than desirable tenant because especially when you have a kind of more well-qualified tenant behind them, right? I think this is on my last slide, but never settle, right? If the tenant, if it's a less than desirable tenant, it shouldn't have met your criteria, right? So if they're qualified, and you should be comfortable with your criteria, which we have. We're not handing them out, but it's on James's website or was or will be. Is it still up there? The tenant screening criteria?
I don't know where it is.
Yeah. So where are we? And this is kind of like in the process. So you've got a property or you've got a property that becomes vacant. I'm going to walk through kind of exactly what I do. This is literally my process. This is a process I've used. It's a process that works. It's been revised over time. There's some new stuff in here for this year. Get it rent ready. What do we need to do? Make sure you've got CO detectors. I won't say CO2 detectors this year because those are, they just always beep. I don't know what's up with those. Have your furnace and your AC serviced, right? How many of your tenants have always changed the filter every month? 0. 0. Royce is like, I do. Yeah, in your own home maybe. But this needs to happen at least every 2 years, if not every year, to keep your furnace and your air conditioner running well. Go and change the filter too. Change the locks, right? This seems obvious, but you need to go change your locks. Change the garage key code if you have a keypad. And get up and push the little purple button on your garage door opener because everyone has a programmable garage door opener in their car now. So if you don't go press that button to basically reset the codes on your garage door opener, they can just drive back up, push the button in their car, and they have access to your house after they've left. Make sure you do that. Do carpet and paint if you need. Take care of the exterior side of the house. Like, what do you have to do? Is there landscaping stuff you need to do? Go make sure you're dealing with any potential water issues. Water issues are expensive, right? Not only are they expensive because you usually have to get inside a wall, inside a cabinet, but they also leave stuff like mold. So go make sure your caulk is good. Go make sure your grout is good. Do all of that stuff. Check, run your hand along every trap, right? Is your hand wet? You might have a problem. Appliances, check them. Make sure they all work. If you have a washer and dryer, it's my personal opinion that you should just give it to the tenant moving out. Do not have your own washer and dryer and offer it as a part of your rental agreement because they break all the time, right? Heating elements and dryers, when you're using a dryer as a tenant, you just run that thing as often as you want. You don't clean the screen, your heating element goes out. It's about $200 every time the heating element goes out. It's much easier to just be like, yeah, I don't have a washer and dryer. You either need to bring one or you can rent one. And then it's not your problem. Inspection items. So if this is a brand new house that you bought, not brand new house, but if it's a new house that you just bought, you probably had an inspection done. In that inspection report, there's a bunch of stuff that you might not think, oh, I don't need to do that right now. But if you go through and look at it, a lot of those little things that you could spend a few $100s on now will save you a lot of headaches with tenants, right? So your inspector goes around and it's like, oh, this outlet has reverse polarity and the plug won't stay in. Guess what? Your tenant's going to be unhappy that the plug doesn't stay in too. So have the outlet replaced. Do it now before a tenant moves in and complains to you. When they complain, it takes your time, it makes them unhappy, and if you don't fix it right away, they get even more unhappy, right? You want your tenants happy.
Oh, I was gonna make a comment on your washer and dryer. I definitely have, like, both.
Oh.
There are definitely some situations where I disagree with Brian on the appliances. Like, I have a house that the washer and dryer is upstairs, and like it's super tight to get in there, and I want to keep my house nice and not have banged up walls, even though, you know, they messed it up, they could pay for it. Patching is never as good as it being, you know, you should
Yeah.
sell that house. No way. Not gonna happen.
Yeah, so if you have an upscale condo that you're renting, right? So a condo that I own has a washer and dryer in it, right? And it's a really nice washer and dryer, and I bought it and it came with the unit, and it's gonna stay there until it breaks. But then it's getting out, right? At the point where it has one repair, I'm done. Like, I don't want it there. And it's the same thing, it's upstairs, right? So, what else do we need to do? Walk the property inside and out. These might seem like super obvious things, but they're not. And if you don't do them, you're gonna pay for it later. Document everything, right? When I walk through a property, I probably take a couple hundred pictures, right? I literally am taking pictures of all the walls, the ceiling, the floor, like everything in the entire house, right? Take before, like the tenant moves out, take pictures of what they left behind so that you can charge them if the tenant moved out. Then you fix it up to what it needs to be rent ready. Take pictures there so that then you can take pictures when that tenant moves out and you can accurately charge them. Take photos during the day. If you take photos at night, even inside, it's really hard, right? The lighting's tough, so try and find a sunny day, which you shouldn't have a problem here in Colorado. Remove any clutter. Don't take pictures of the tenant's personal belongings unless you have permission. I may know someone who got in trouble for doing this once when he was buying a house. James, can't believe you did that. It was me. Take a walkthrough video. So I'm going to just show you an example where you can all get really dizzy, and it's silly, but this video will save you all sorts of time. So you basically just start outside, and I'm going to just jump to inside so you guys don't have to throw up too much with my shaking. But I comment my way through the video, right? And I walk through the entire house.
There's an Osmo for like $300. It's perfect.
No.
2 full bathrooms.
So this video is probably 3.5, 4 minutes long, right? And basically, the reason you're taking that video will be readily apparent in a moment. So, advertise. Where do we advertise other than Craigslist? Zillow, what? BarkBuzz?
Marketplace.
Oh, I was like, what's Bark? I've never heard of this site. BarkBuzz. Marketplace. Okay? Like Facebook Marketplace? Okay? So, yep, Zillow. So, Craigslist used to be #1, and there's another site here in town called Northern Colorado Rentals that used to, some people used to say, oh, I feel like I get higher quality tenants from that site. I've advertised on both. And I really think that at this point, these are your top 2. It's Fort Collins, Craigslist if you're in Fort Collins, or Greeley or Loveland. It's all kind of the same Craigslist. It's there, and it's Zillow, right? Zillow is quickly becoming the #1 place to find your rental. And so what I want to do is actually just pull Craigslist up. Hopefully we won't have anything inappropriate show up. It is Craigslist.
That is not my computer, just to be clear.
So for those of you that don't know, it's under housing, and it's apartments and housing. And when you come in here, there are multiple ways to view this. My favorite when I'm doing rent comps is to look at the map. So if you've never looked at the map, you can kind of zoom in whatever area you're in, and then basically find, hey, here's a unit, and it's $1,500. It's 2-bedroom mobile home for rent. However, when people are looking, chances are they're looking at this. So from what you guys can see, what ad, let me scroll down just a little so we have, what ad that you can see up here would you describe as something you might click on? This one?
Big empty, no, bottom right.
This one. You would click on that? You like that picture?
I like the 2 above.
That draws you that draws you in? You like the fireplace or something? Or you just like that it's empty? Yeah. So do you want to click on this? Who said yes? You said yes. Why? Because it looks presentable? Okay. But you don't really know what the inside of the unit is going to look like. Right? So if you were going to pick somewhere to live today and you had to go by these photos, which one would you pick? This one? I bet you most people would pick this one. Right? Why is that? Because that's a really nice looking inside place. I don't give a shit what the outside looks like because I want to know what I'm living in. Right? So when you're advertising, make sure that your #1 picture is something that you're actually going to want to have people look at. Right?
Would you flag them for duplicate?
No. We don't have time for that, Royce. So, yeah, like these places that post a picture of their swimming pool, I'm like, that's great. Am I living in the pool? No, right? Why do I care? Or like this, right? Does this look appetizing as a rental to you? I'm sorry if this is your rental and you're here. This is not my fault. Do a better job, right? This looks pretty decent, right? It's weird to me to have a bedroom, especially when there's a refrigerator and a sink in it, like as your #1 photo. This is dumb, right? Pick me to be your Valentine. Great title. Not. I mean, this seems decent. You know, this is a shop, so I'll give it that. They're renting out their shop. But you can very quickly see, like, whatever this one is down here, that one looks pretty nice. That's Royce's house that I put online. He doesn't know it yet. No, just kidding. So you can see advertising and how you advertise is going to matter. And I'm going to just quickly pull up Zillow as well so you can kind of see the difference. One of the things I did notice, how many of you are renting any of your properties for $2,000 or over at this point in the market? How about 2,100?
We just got it.
21? Yep. Yeah. So what you're going to see, what happened here? Oh, that is so weird. It must have not switched the link.
Huh, that looks like Zillow.
Yeah, it doesn't. What's funny is I clicked on it at home and it went to Zillow. So that's even more odd. Oh, man. I should have just, like... Well, that's not even that useful. So the other day when I pulled this up, and I don't know where I was in Fort Collins specifically, but what I noticed is that for the most part, rents have been about $1,895 to $1,995 for 3 and 4 bedrooms in Fort Collins, kind of not in Old Town, but Southside, Loveland, even Windsor. And when I pulled this up, almost every one of these was $2,000 or slightly more. And so I'm hopeful that this year we will actually break through that kind of 2,000 barrier, which is a huge barrier to break through mentally for people, right? I'm happy to pay $1,995, but you want me to pay $2,025? Like, that's a whole different ballgame, right? It's like, you want to pay $99,000 for this house or $104, right? Everyone wants to pay $99. So once we kind of cross that barrier into 2,000, I think you'll start to see $2,050, $2,100, $2,200 for some of the houses that, you know, haven't been able to get past the $2,000 barrier. So again, you know, taking a look at these, just notice, you know, which ones are decent, right? Like top right, this looks like a really decent outside, looks nice. You can clearly see it's probably a tri-level house. But beyond that, you know, outside pictures as your first picture, I don't know if it does you any favors, right? To me, this is much more attractive, right? A nice open layout kitchen, it looks very clean inside. That's where you're living, right? You're not going camping, you're not sleeping in the yard. All right, so there's all sorts of places you can advertise. Place a great ad, lots of pictures. There's no reason for you to have 3 pictures in your ad. You should have like 20 pictures in your ad. People want to see your place. When they click on your ad, you've got that shot to say, here's how awesome my place is. So this is how you do that. List a local phone number, right? An email, use the randomized Craigslist or whatever. But your phone number should be local, My cell phone is not a local phone number. I have a Google phone number that's 970, because people won't call an out-of-state area code to rent from you. So if you're renting with an out-of-state area code, get yourself a Google phone or get yourself a local number. Renew your Craigslist ad every 3 days. For those of you who don't know, they drop down and you can renew it and it pops back up on the first page. If it's not on the first page, you're not getting as much exposure. These are obvious things, but sometimes we just don't remember. Don't post lots of new ads like Royce was pointing out, or he will personally flag you. He searches Craigslist every day at his job and just flags ads.
I just flag all of them so mine go to the top.
Yeah, don't do that either. Jeez. I'm glad he didn't have the mic. Not going to repeat that. So, when do we want to place our ad? As soon as we know our tenant's moving out, but the latest time we want to place our ad is 60 days before they actually would be the lease start date, right? Before they move out. So, why? High quality tenants tend to plan ahead, right? If you're going to move anywhere, are you waiting until the 2 weeks before you have to move to look for a place? If you are, chances are high you're not going to find the place that you really want to find. So don't do this. Yes?
Wait for my phone.
Oh, he's coming with the mic. So tenants who need that place right now today, and you'll get these calls, they're likely lower quality. Not always. Stuff happens, but that's generally the case. Yes?
Okay, my husband and I just had an argument about this. We have a vacant unit right now that became available due to a bad situation. He wanted to list it, like occupy immediately. I wanted to list it as of March 1st, so we didn't go totally desperate. What do you think about that?
I don't know that there's any downside to you listing available immediately. I mean, there's lots of reasons it could be available immediately, right? Your previous person could have been evicted, right? They could have abandoned the unit. It doesn't necessarily leave a black mark on your rental. You just may not find people that are able to move in immediately, but sometimes you do. And I've advertised them. If it's available, I want someone in there as fast as I can that's qualified. But I'm not going to settle. So
I don't.
Post two ads.
you don't
I
have the
would
mic.
also make one more comment about that, in that if you are still charging the last tenant rent, they're responsible for that, there's probably an obligation on your part to start marketing it immediately and not having the extra week or two where it's vacant and they're responsible for that.
Yeah.
Well,
And that situation would be like a situation where they say, hey, I'm going to break my lease, I'm going to move out. Your lease should say you have to give me 60 days notice. In that case, you're not going to bill double rent, so you want to get it rented as fast as you can.
yeah, and our lease does say that, but in this case, we allowed them to abandon so that we could retake possession, thinking that was better for us.
Yeah. So I mean, Royce says, place 2 ads, use different pictures in a different order and different text, right? Because if you don't, they'll both disappear.
Yeah, because Royce is going to flag both.
Yep. Royce is already set up to flag them. So try for the highest possible rent. This doesn't apply to you. You want to try and find the rent where you're going to get a qualified tenant. But this is why we start early, is we're like, hey, what do I think the highest rent I can get is? And if you are like, hey, I think I can get $17.95 for this 3-bed, 2-bath in Fort Collins, and you put that ad out there and you get 17 phone calls on the first day, you didn't go high enough, right? The goal here is to find the top of the market where you get qualified tenants, right? If you advertise that house at $2,500, you might get a couple calls, but you'll find out very quickly that the interest level is probably that they're not qualified and they're looking for somewhere they're willing to pay more, but they can't actually pass your screening process. So start really high, and then each week, if you don't get good quality calls, drop your rent a little bit, right? Don't go insane, right? You're not going to price it at $3,000 and start moving down at $50 increments, but start it, in this market for this summer, start at $2,100. And if you're 90 days out, move it down $50 after a week and no calls, and then move it down another $50, right? And so I've had excellent luck with this. One example, I rented half of a duplex for $19.90 in Fort Collins, 3-bed. So it was basically more rent than I was getting for some of my single-family homes in Fort Collins, and it was built in the late 60s, early 70s. But it was because there were 2 people that wanted to live together, and they were looking really early ahead of time, and they couldn't find anything else they liked that worked, and this worked perfect for them. So I now get much lower than that on that same unit. Obviously, you're not allowed to discriminate. You can read on what all sorts of things. Do you have a question, Royce?
Yeah, just
Go.
more of a On the place a great ad, as far as great pictures, one of the things that I do is when I buy a property, I know it's going to be a rental. If there were good quality professional photos taken before, I've had James reach out or myself reach out to the listing agent to see if we can get permission to use those photos. So that's one way you can save money. I know some of the professional property managers around here are asking you to have professional photos taken, and it definitely makes a difference. You're going to be trying to get the top of the market for rent.
Yep. Don't just download the photos from Zillow and use
Don't
them.
do that.
So here's an example of what I think is a good opening picture, right? It shows you kind of custom paint, stainless appliances, granite countertops. You can kind of see the super nice washer and dryer. It's super clean. It has laminate or hardwood. The paint looks good, right? It's a attractive, oh, hey, I would want to be in that kitchen, right? If I was looking for a 2-bed, 2-bath condo, this looks really nice. So what else is going on here? Bulleted list of amenities, right? For me, this is what I prefer. If you decide to write a dissertation on why your apartment or single-family home is amazing, guess who's going to read it? You. That's it. No one else is reading a dissertation on your place. It's just not happening, right? So for those of you that can't read this, I have, right, Craigslist does this for you. So you get to type in the title, but they put in the address, they put in the rent, they put in 2-bedroom from fields you fill in. So this is done for you, but I'm always all caps. I'm always asterisks on both sides. A lot of people do this too, but I have good pictures to back it up. Available February 1st. This isn't actually available, so no worries. But available February 1st. Why do I put this here? Because this is the first question people want to know. When can I move in? February 1. And then I put rent here again. Why? Because people can't find where the rent is. It doesn't matter how many ads they look at. They're like, how much is rent? And they're going to ask. And I tell them what it includes. Hey, you get pool and exercise room access with your $13.95 a month, right? Hey, where is it? It's a beautiful second-floor condo, backs to open space, private covered deck, 1-car detached garage with opener, peaceful and quiet, vaulted ceiling with open concept layout. Master bedroom has large walk-in closet, ceiling fans in family room in both bedrooms, granite countertop, stainless steel appliances, washer dryer in unit, community clubhouse, easy access to I-25 shopping, blah, 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 right? Very, very quick. If I read that, I know exactly what the unit's like, and then I can just click through all the rest of the pictures. Craigslist used to only let you have 12, now you can have 24. There's no excuse for having a shortage of pictures. Show people what your unit looks like. Make sure your unit looks good. Any questions on ads? Royce.
This is just a comment. One thing I like to do
Questions,
is,
Royce? No
No,
comments.
I have no questions. I'm trying to help you out here. One of these days I'll teach class. No.
He
All
said
right.
it on the mic.
I said one of these days.
One of these days is next
Okay.
week.
There we go. Actually, if you again find a professional property manager, you'll find that actually you can include some simple HTML within the listings themselves and make them look really professional. You can go copy one of those other listings that looks really good and make yourself look really professional that way. I like to do that. It's really easy to add that extra kind of touch to it.
Yeah, Royce also puts lots of keywords in like hidden fonts and other things that
I
are fun.
do that as
So, yes. All right. So, you've advertised. What's next? Take calls, right? Seriously, answer your damn phone when it rings. Like you're trying to rent your place. If you don't answer your phone, guess what happens? You don't rent your place, right? You're like, oh, hey, I'm just going to let all the calls pile up. I'll return all the calls on Saturday. Guess what happens then? All the people you call back don't answer their phone because they've already rented from someone else. This is a game of speed. So, return calls, return emails quickly. Don't let them sit. If you're managing your property and you can't do this, hire a property manager. Simple. Answer any questions they might have and start writing down the dumb and funny ones and bring them to me so I can use them in class. So, number one thing you're going to get asked almost every time someone calls you, how much is rent? And you might be thinking, you're looking at the ad. How do you not know? Duh, you're clearly dumb. I'm not renting to you. Don't have this thought, right? Because the next question they're going to ask is, when's it available, right? It's in the ad, right? This used to drive me nuts till I figured out, well, if you're looking for a place to live, you're scrolling through hundreds of ads. They call you, and if they've already moved on, they're looking at the next thing while they're talking to you. So don't be offended, and don't let this influence your decision somehow. This is just what's going to happen.
I have a solution for that, actually.
Yeah?
So when people call and they ask me how much rent is, I always tell them it's $50 more than what it says in the ad. That's what I tell them. Not an actual number, just $50 whatever more than what it says in the ad.
So terrible. All right. So this is what you're going to be doing on the other end of the phone sometimes. Just like, oh, just stop talking, right? So how do we control this, right? You need to take control of this phone call. It's seriously important. Otherwise, you'll be on the phone for an hour with some people, and you'll be laughing and crying at some point, but it's not any fun. Get their name, get their phone, get their email right up front. That way, if you get disconnected, you're good to go. Next question you're going to ask, who will be living there besides yourself, right? Why do we ask this? Because you want to know. Yes, because we want to know, yeah, it's me and my wife. Excellent, we're done. Or you will get some answers that are like, well, it's me and I have 2 kids and my mom and then her brother and then her brother's fiance and their kid, right? Literally no joke. This will be how some of your conversations go. And you're like, okay, well, that's 17 people and it's a 2-bedroom apartment, so you won't pass my criteria because I have a max number of people per bedroom in my written criteria. I'm not discriminating against familial status, which is totally illegal. If you post an ad that says, hey, great family-oriented place, do not do that. That is against the law, right? However, if they're like, I have 7 people that are going to live there and you have 2 bedrooms, your written criteria, which we'll talk about in a little bit, should state, I only allow 2 people per bedroom max. So in a 2-bedroom, the max I can have is 4. You will not pass the rental screening criteria. Thank you for calling. Have a great day. Bye. You're done. The goal of this is to keep these conversations as short as possible until you know they're qualified. So every question you ask is a chance for you to essentially say, you're not qualified, you wouldn't pass my rental screening criteria, and hang up. Do you have any pets? Obviously, we want to know. Remember, 75 to 80% of the people out there have pets. So if you're like, I don't allow pets in my rentals, guess what? Your ability to rent to people is lessened dramatically. How many pets do you have? What breeds are they? What size? Are they neutered? Are they spayed? Do you have a no puppy thing? How old are they? These are all things you want to know about whatever pets they have. I'm short on time.
Yeah, well, you should write some of the, I think especially how many people are living there and the pets. I try to make sure I record that with the phone call, and I double check that back against when their application actually comes in, because you will find differences, and that is a good time to press them on what they had said.
Yep, so you should be writing their answers in a notebook. I used to have a notebook that was specifically for when I got tenant screening calls. 1 page per person, write the name, phone number, email at the top, and then the answers to all of their questions. So I basically had their story of what they're answering. So document this. That is a very good point. Do you have good landlord references? Most people will say yes. Some people, they will say, well, except for the last place where this and this and this happened. At least they're telling you, right? That is a plus. If they are open with you about the problem, that garners some trust. Are you renting now? Why are we asking this? We want to know their track record. We want to know how much they're paying, which is a great point. How much do you pay? Why do we care about this?
Because you're paying $1,200 a month right now, and yours is $1,900 a month.
Yep. So I've literally had a call where I'm advertising $1,895, and I asked this question, and they're like $600 a month. So I'm like, okay, can you explain to me why you're paying $600 now, and it's triple, what you're paying now? Why? That's a good conversation to have. So if you're squeamish about any of these questions that I'm suggesting that you ask, again, hire a property manager. You're not cut out to ask these questions. You have to be firm. So why are you moving? Because I'm being evicted, right? That's why I'm moving. Great. Thanks for calling. We're done. You want to know why they're moving. Are they transferring from out of state? Are they moving because of a job? Are they moving because of a divorce? Why are they actually moving? The common answer recently has been, my landlord is selling the house. I have to get out. So What is your approximate gross monthly income? How many of you would feel comfortable asking this question to a random person on the phone? If your hand is not in the air, do not be a landlord. Call a property manager. This is like one of the most important questions you can ask. If you can't ask that and get the answer, it's really tough. This is, how are they going to pay for your house? So, what's your approximate gross monthly income? I don't care how they give it to me. Well, I make $60,000 a year. Great. I don't need to divide by 12. And they'll try to do the math on the phone. You're like, I'm good. I can do the math. So, find this out. It's super important. What are we looking for usually? 3x the rent, right? So if your rent's $2,000, we need to see them make at least $6,000 in gross monthly income. Gross is before taxes. Gross is like, hey, when you sign the offer letter for your new job and it says $50,000, and then like at the end of the year, like, but I only got 33, right? It's the gross number that we care about, because when you take the gross number and you take out taxes and then you take out rent, you have enough left, if it's 3x or 2.5x for some people, to live on. You have enough to buy clothes, buy gas, buy food. People that are like 2x, you don't have enough. It's just too tight. All right. Do you have any felonies or other convictions? Again, this could be a difficult question, especially when they're like, yeah, let me tell you about it, right? So this is an entirely new slide this year, because last year there were some cases and HUD was basically saying, oh, maybe you can't just say no felonies ever. So I did some more research on this, and this is kind of what is different. So HUD is basically looking at a study from the 1960s done at the University of Minnesota that shows if you commit a crime and then serve your time or whatever, and then when you're back in society for 7 years, you are just as, and you don't commit another crime, you are just as likely to commit another crime as someone who has not committed a crime. So basically you're back to square one, right? You're a non-crime committer at that point. And so what they're doing is they're saying, well, if it's been 7 years and you're back in society, it's probably okay. So again, note this isn't 7 years since the crime, right? You go out and you kill somebody and you spend 20 years in prison. It's 20 years in prison after your probation and parole or whatever, and then 7 years in society, right? If you move your criteria past beyond 7 years, so the written criteria that you guys are all going to have, when you have that, if you say, oh, you know what, for me it's going to be 10 years, you need to supply evidence that that somehow lowered your risk. However, they're basing it on this study, so good luck, right? The chances that you're going to prove that your risk is somehow different than HUD's risk is probably pretty low. So you can indeed prohibit the lifetime sex offender. There are plenty of studies out there that show that this is just never cured. So that one you can prohibit. And this is basically how HUD and the EEOC, which is the Equal Opportunity Commission, which deals with like hiring people and the fairness there, this is how they try to create law. They're not a legislative branch of the government, but they basically try and take somebody to court. So you can imagine the EEOC says, we're going to take BMW and Dollar Tree to court. BMW says, we don't want to mess around. Here's $1 million. We're not going to fight that in court. However, Dollar Tree says, no, we do hiring practices fine. So we're going to court. And basically, they go to court and they say, we follow essentially what the EEOC says they follow for hiring practices. So if we're discriminating, they're discriminating, and the case gets dismissed. But it's a pain to go through that. So that's essentially what you're trying to do here, is if HUD's doing it and you're doing it, how can they possibly come after you? Does that make sense? So 7 years may be the new thing. Basically, we just can't say no felony, no forever anymore, which you used to be able to do, and now that's not the case. All right, back to the actual screening question. So when they actually, any felonies or other convictions, and they say yes, you now need to say, okay, what happened, right? And you need to have in your written criteria, if they say, oh, I have 2 DUIs, you're like, well, that's okay from my written criteria. But if they're like, hey, I did something when I was younger, it was 5 years ago, and, it was a stupid mistake, and I swear I've had these calls. And you're like, okay, well, what was the offense? Well, it was armed robbery. Okay, doesn't sound like a stupid mistake to me. Sounds like, huh?
Against my landlord.
Yeah, against my landlord. Yeah. So if you screen enough tenants, I once asked this question, and they're like, yes, I have a felony. And I'm like, okay, what was the felony? And he was like, second-degree murder. And I was like, excellent. You will not pass my screening process. Thank you for calling, right? But now you're going to have to ask some additional questions. You know, how long has it been since you were off probation, right? You're going to have to figure those out. It's going to be a little bit, it's going to get a little weird. Hire a property manager if you don't want to ask these questions. So, have you had any evictions? This is obvious. If they say yes or anything in between, for me, it's a no eviction, right? There are really, really like small cases, corner cases where I could see, hey, I wasn't on the lease, but I was, or I was on the lease, but my roommates didn't pay. But even then, you put yourself in the situation. Being evicted is a big deal for a landlord. How's your credit? What's the answer that everyone will give you to this? My credit's pretty good. Okay, do you know your score? Yeah, it's 300, right? Okay, you know the scale goes to 800, not 301, right? Like, so ask them how their credit is, and a lot of people will just say, hey, this is what's going on. Why is your credit 500? Well, I had a bankruptcy, or I had this, or whatever it was, and they'll tell you. If they don't tell you, that's a hint. How long are you looking to stay? Why am I asking this? Yep, so if they're only going to be there a month, I don't want them, but I would much rather rent to somebody, if I had two equivalent people, I would much rather rent to somebody who wants to stay 2 to 3 years versus 1 year, right? I'm looking for longevity. When are you looking to move in? Because they didn't see what date your property is available in the ad. They're just wanting to move in whenever their current lease ends, normally. So find out when they're looking to move in. Some of them will be like, tomorrow. And you're like, well, it's not available for 2 months. Okay, thanks for calling. Right? I mean, you'll get these calls. If the answers don't meet your criteria, there you go. What are we doing? We're hanging up. If they do meet your written criteria, then what are we doing? We're emailing that video we made, the walkthrough video. This is why it's important. If you email them this video, sorry that she's still up there. It's supposed to go away. Super annoying in the reflection. So I can only imagine how you guys feel. But you're emailing this video, you're emailing them the application, which you can download from James's site as well, and we'll walk through it here in a minute, and you're going to set a showing time if they like what they see in the video, right? And then ask them to confirm their showing time. Hey, when do you want to go see it? Great. Now you've seen a video. If they don't like the video, guess what? You didn't waste any time driving a half an hour to Greeley to show a property. Perfect. So, get that off the screen. Have to change that for next time. So, how many times is your phone going to ring to rent a property? Royce says a lot. What's a good number? What do you guys think? 10? 1? 5? Really, it's a class participation. They're not rhetorical questions. You might think they are, but they're not. Just shout some numbers out. What do you think?
30 times.
30, 100, 15. 3 per $100 of rent. Ratios for calls. So I had Craigslist ads posted for 3 weeks for 2 properties. 42 calls for the first, 28 for the second, and a lot more in email. Right? These are calls, not including the emails. Fun calls you can expect. I have a felony. We just covered that. But it was a long time ago, which now might actually matter. Right? Those aren't my drugs. This is a common saying. People like to tell me they weren't my drugs. I'm like, I feel like I'm in a cop show where I like didn't plan it. No, I don't know whose drugs. Is it your car? Yeah, it's my car. Well, aren't they your drugs? No, I don't know how they got here. He was just a stupid kid. Always a good one. Oh yeah, how old was he? 27. She was 17, but told him she was 22. Yep, you can just fill in the rest of that story. Eviction, right? This is what people have told me. I paid all my rent. By the time I could prove it, we were already out. At this point, I want to just stop and be like, do you understand what you said? Like, you basically told me that you paid your rent and you couldn't prove that you paid your rent until after you were evicted, which takes 30 days. I'm like, come on. I didn't get the paperwork. It got sent to my mom. Okay, call your mom. Have your mom call you. I don't know what to tell you. Why did it get sent to your mom? Section 8. How many of you know what Section 8 is? Government subsidized housing, right? So you can usually get above the rent range. I'm not sure why that's there.
No, they're asking.
Yes. Thank you. I'm like, that's not right. So you will have Section 8 people call you above what they're allowed to actually spend on their unit and ask you to lower the rent. They will actually set up, I've had people lie through the phone call to get to the property and wait till they were alone with me to basically ask me to drop my rent by $500 a month. Yep. They were like, I can only pay $13.95. I'm like, the house is $18.95. I'm like, $13.95 doesn't even cover my costs. So you'll get this. Some of them will say, I'll pay you outside the normal contract. Do not do this. If the Section 8 people in the county do not set it up, do not take payment from them. This is not okay. I've been nicknamed in real time. Everyone likes this story. For those of you that are new, I had somebody call and she was like asking me a couple questions, and then she was just like, so yo, B-Town, are you gonna rent this house to me or what? And I was like, I am not. Thank you for calling. And I was like, wow, that's awesome. So if you ever hear anyone call me B-Town, punch them in the kidney. Especially if it's Royce. So, living in a motel. Yeah, don't start that crap. Fire! Yeah, that's what's going through my head, and I can see it on James's face, so this might be the last class I ever teach. Living in a motel. If they're like, hey, I'm living in a motel now, is this okay? Yeah, it depends. Some people are like this, some people are like this. Yeah, it totally depends. If you're living in a motel because you just got a divorce and you can't live in your house, that's totally fine. If you're living in a motel because you just got evicted and now you're like in a motel, there's other circumstances that don't make it fine for someone to rent to you, right? So just because they're in a motel doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? You really have to weigh the circumstances. However, the people living in a motel that need a place immediately tend to be lower quality callers. So keep that in mind. There's a bunch of ways to show the property. Put a lockbox on the property and have people show it themselves. James used to do this. He would collect their ID to make sure there were no damages. Hold an open house. I'm going to be there from 1 to 3 on Saturday. You guys show up whenever you want. This way it works really well. Schedule individual showings. This sucks because you have to be there every single time on different days. So no fun. Schedule back-to-back showings. This is my personal favorite. This is what I do personally. Every 15 minutes for 2 to 3 hours. So I'm going to be at the property from 1 to 3 on Saturday, but I've scheduled somebody for 1, 1:15, 1:30, 1:45, 2, and on and on and on, right? I get one-on-one time with each prospective tenant. I get to watch them come in. I get to watch them leave. There's some interaction where the other tenant from the previous showing might still be there, and you get the urge of, oh, it's urgent that I actually turn in my application. Right? That's what I want. I want them to know, hey, I'm here for 2 hours and people are coming by every 15 minutes. So there's demand for my unit. If you want to rent it, here's the application. I'd turn it in because I operate on first come, first served basis. Do they show up on time? Do they have a clean car? Car, house, roughly the same. Cleanliness for most people. How's their attitude? How's their behavior? I've had people, when you walk into a rental with me, and I'm showing it, I will ask you to take your shoes off. I take my own shoes off in my own home, and I take my shoes off in my rentals. I have asked people to remove their shoes, and they have refused, and I have shown them the door, right? I'm like, if you're not going to respect that, you're probably not going to respect the property either.
I want to make one more comment
Go
about the scheduled showings 15 minutes apart, and that is they're less likely to ask for a discount on rent if they know you have 6 people coming there for showing.
Yep. And how many showings are you going to have? So the first property I had 13 showings. Saturday I had 8 showings. 3 of them no-showed. This is also why I do it from a block of time, because I know people aren't going to show up. Right? You have one showing, you drive to Greeley, and then they don't show up. Oh, killer. Right? I got 1 incomplete app at this first showing. Then I had 5 more showings. I got 1 complete app, and then I got 4 more apps through email afterwards. That's good. That's really good. Second property, I had 10 showings. This is not fun. Monday 3, Tuesday 2, 1 didn't show. Friday 2, Tuesday 2, Saturday 1, and finally I got a complete app. Right? So be prepared to do some legwork. Right? It's not easy. Bryce.
So Make sure you call the tenants or potential tenants before you even start driving to the property.
It's on this slide.
Okay, I was going to say, I've done it. I've even had somebody say they're on their way,
Yeah, and not show
30-minute
up.
drive later, and they still don't show up.
Yep. So, for your own safety, especially if you're going by yourself, let someone know where you're going, how long you're going to be there, and what time you're going to be back. And if not, they should call you. And then they should call the authorities if they can't get a hold of you. Show up early, turn all the lights on, greet them outside, introduce yourself, give them a quick tour, comment on the best features, right? If you're just like, hey, do you want to come and see the rental? Yeah, that's not good, right? It's your turn to sell. This is where salesmanship comes in. Hey, come on in. Would you mind taking your shoes off? Let me show you the kitchen. We've got granite countertops, stainless steel appliances. Walk them through your best features, right? Take them out like in the condo that was advertised. I take them out on the little deck because it's awesome because it backs to open space in the trail. And almost none of the other ones in that neighborhood do. So I'm like, there's only 4 units that have this, right? And you back to this. There's no noise back here. It's awesome. 2 raccoons live in that tree. They climb up and down all the time. It's a fun thing. So invite them to take their time and look around. James will tell you, be careful. Do not let people steal, especially other people's medications from the bathroom and other things that aren't theirs, right? This is something to be cognizant of, especially because it's your property. You probably have a tenant that's still currently in there with their stuff in there. You're responsible. Ask if they have any questions. Explain pet fees, utility fees, averages. It's hard to get utility averages anymore because it's now protected under privacy. And then discuss next steps. You're going to fill out the application. I'm going to process it based on when you give it to me. I'm going to notify you whether you pass or not. Then you're going to be required to put a reservation deposit down. And then we're going to get together and sign a lease. Thanks for coming. I look forward to getting your application. Right? Pretty easy. All right, the application. So there is a 3-page application that you can download from James's site. I don't know how you're going to just post that to the meetup board or something.
I think send me an email. I think it's like behind an email screen.
Yeah. So this is the rental application that I use. So you basically have access to exactly what I'm using. So if you can't read at the top, this is personal information, just the normal stuff, right? Name, date of birth, social security number. You must write your social security number down. Why? I'm going to check your credit. If you're not willing to give me your social security number, you're not renting my place. Housing history. You'll notice there's present, previous, and next previous. I tell them in person, I need 5 years of housing history. All right? If they don't have it and they're like, hey, I've lived with my parents and now, you know, I've lived in one other place, that's fine. Write down the place you lived in and your parents' place. And I'm calling your parents, right? They were your landlord. So why do I want 5 years? Or multiple landlords? Huh? Check them. Yeah, so I call the first landlord where they live now, right? And the response I get is, yeah, Royce is awesome. You know, we love renting to him. We'd totally rent to him again. Perfect. Check. Royce meets all the boxes, right? No, because you call the second landlord who he doesn't live at now, and they're like, Royce is never, ever renting from anyone I know ever again because he took all the doors off the house, put them outside, and there were 30 people sleeping in the unit when I went over to check on it, right? Why would the first landlord that he's living at say these nice things about him? To get him out, yes. Exactly. So you want to check multiple housing history. Employment is kind of the same way. I need at least 5 years of employment history. If you've spent 5 years at one job, I'm only calling that job, right? It's not, I don't need to call somebody you worked for 7 years ago to find out how you were. Like, I'm going to ask now. I mean, you can. Yeah, I've definitely called them. If for some reason you can't get a hold of the current employer, I'm always calling every employer listed, right? But I want to get a hold of everybody. Next thing up, current income. How much do you make? When do you make it? What's the source? And do you have proof, right? After that, financial information. What are your debts? I've got this car. I've got this credit card. How much do you owe? What's your monthly payment? And then what are your bank balances? Checking, savings, and investment accounts, right? Write your account number down. How many people don't want to write their account number down? A lot of people. Why? Because they're worried you're going to take their account number and go to the bank and take their money. And I'm like, remember the application fee that you wrote to me on a check? I already have your account number. What am I going to do with it? Nothing. If I go to the bank and the bank gives me money, it's the bank's fault. They'll replace it. So you can put some people at ease with that. Is the total move-in amount, damage deposit, and first month's rent currently available? Everyone will check yes. And then you will look up here and like it's $1,900 for first month's rent and $1,900 for damage deposit. So they need $3,800. And you'll look up here at checking and it'll be like $700 savings, $1,200. You're like, where's the rest of it? How do you have it currently available? You need to ask those questions. Emergency contacts. These are the people that I'm going to call that if I find you hurt, or I can't find you, or I find you dead, that's who I'm calling, right? I'm going to call those people first. Personal references, non-family. I want 2 people that you think are good references for you that I'm going to call, and I'm going to ask them some questions. So pick good people. If you give someone the opportunity to pick any 2 people they want to pick, and they pick people to say bad things about them, something's not right. It's like, hey, I'm going to pick my 2 enemies and let you call them. Doesn't make any sense. Who's going to live in the property? What kind of pets are going to live in the property? Do your pets have aggressive behavior? Have they ever bitten or harmed another person or animal? If yes, please explain. What kind of vehicles do you own? For whatever reason, people always leave off the license plate. I always have to call them back and be like, what's your license plate? I swear it's because they're sitting at the table. They're like, what's my license plate, honey? I don't know. Yeah, I'm just going to skip it, right? They just don't want to walk outside to get the license plate number. All right, then some fun questions. Simple yes or no. Has applicant ever been sued? Has applicant ever been served a late rent notice, right? We're giving them an opportunity to tell us anything about them that might impair their ability to rent our place. How many evictions have been filed on you? Not how many times have you been evicted, how many times has an eviction been filed on you, right? The answer here could be 7, and how many times were you evicted could be 0. But I care about this, right? Has applicant ever been guilty of a felony? Again, we asked this on the phone, we're asking it on paper. Is the answer the same? Has applicant ever broken a lease? Has applicant ever filed for bankruptcy? How many times has rent or mortgage been paid late in the last 12 months? It's a pretty good indicator. Has applicant had a foreclosure or repossession? Has applicant been brought to court by another landlord? Has applicant ever moved owing rent or damaged an apartment? Has applicant ever been locked out of their apartment by the sheriff? Guess what's that usually called? An eviction, right? We asked him on the phone, have you been evicted? We're giving him 2 opportunities in these questions to tell us, right? If yes, please explain. This is your shot. As an applicant, this is your shot to tell us everything you want us to know that might overcome it. Is there anything negative on your credit report you want to tell me about? This is the same thing. Hopefully you told me on the phone, but now's your shot. Hey, I had a bankruptcy, I got divorced, credit cards got all messed up, and I'm recovering. Okay, great. That doesn't rule you out, but at least you've told me. I don't have to pull the report and find it. When I pull the report and find surprises, chances are high you're not getting approved. Has applicant ever been known by another name? Yes or no? I have a crazy story about this one where I had somebody apply and basically they were going under like 2 names, and I finally found them on Facebook and figured out the whole story. It was pretty crazy. Do they own a vacuum, a lawnmower, a waterbed, a washer, dryer, a musical instrument? Why do I care about waterbed?
So you don't want to, insurance.
Insurance, right? Waterbeds are usually a rider on insurance or unallowed, depending on your policy, right? Why do I care if they have a vacuum? So they can clean the unit. Washer and dryer, I don't really care. Musical instrument, I don't particularly care, but if they list like drums, and they're in a like 12-unit apartment complex, that might be bad, right? You might have to have a conversation to prevent some stuff. Does anyone smoke? Yes or no? Lots of people that smoke will check no, because they believe that because they smoke outside, that somehow means they don't smoke. That is not the question that's being asked. The question is, does anyone smoke? And it also doesn't say, does anyone smoke cigarettes? It says, does anyone smoke? So I've had lots of people check no. I go to pick the application up at their house, and their front yard is littered with cigarette butts. They don't smoke inside, but they smoke outside. Not good. The last part of page 3. So they need to list the address, how they heard about us, blah, blah, blah. And then I'm going to read this because there's a couple important points. A non-refundable application fee of $30 is required and is being paid herewith. The undersigned expressly agrees that if this application is approved, applicant herewith agrees to rent this property. Processing of the application shall be as timely as possible. Results can be delivered in many ways. Once approved, the applicant agrees to pay a reservation fee in the amount of 1 month's rent in the form of a cashier's check, right, secured funds, within 24 hours. You pass the application, you want to rent the property, you've got 24 hours, otherwise I'm moving on. I cannot wait. I need it locked down. The applicant also agrees to sign the lease agreement and other related paperwork within 7 days. Sooner, obviously, if they're moving in sooner than 7 days. Has to be at least 1 day prior to the move-in date. Otherwise, management will assume the applicant has decided to forfeit the reservation fee payment and will begin remarketing the property. So they decide, yep, we passed, here's the reservation deposit, and then they don't want to sign the lease paperwork. They forfeit that deposit of 1 month's rent because you've taken it off the market, right? That's essentially damages that you're getting. If applicant's not approved, all monies given herewith, less application fee shown above shall be returned to applicant. And if I don't run a credit report, which is all what I'm spending the $30 on, I don't make money running applicants, right? But if I don't spend their $30 on a credit report, I'm giving it back to them. Like if I'm processing it, I'm like, yeah, you're not going to pass, you know, because your landlord's all said you are not a good tenant. I'm just going to be like, yeah, here's your application feedback. I'll send it to you in the mail. That's me being nice applicant, because a lot of places are like, hey, we're collecting 10 applications, it's $30 each, and then they process one and it passes, and they didn't do anything with the other 9, but they're keeping the $30 application fee because they applied. That's just not my style. And again, applicant further agrees that if you decide as the applicant not to move into the property, we keep all money that has been given to us. I declare the application is complete. I herewith give my permission for anyone contacted, because this is what form you're going to have to send if they have a property manager who's like, we need the release. This is the release of their information. To release the credit or personal information of the undersigned applicant to management or their authorized agents at any time for the purposes of entering into and continuing to offer or collect on any agreement and or credit extended. I further authorize management or their agents to verify the application information, including but not limited to obtaining criminal records, contacting creditors, blah, 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 all that, whether listed or not. Many times the landlord will say, well, yeah, then they moved to this other place. Great, do you have that contact info? Great, I'm going to call them. At the time of the application and at any time in the future with regard to any agreement entered into with management. Any false information will constitute grounds for rejection of this application, or management may at any time immediately terminate any agreement entered into in reliance of your misinformation that was given. So if you lie on your application and I find out about it halfway through your lease, I have the right to terminate your lease. And this is the very bottom. So along with that application, you also need to submit the application fee and cashier's check only, please. Copy of valid driver's license or state-issued ID. Proof of current balances in checking and savings accounts, so I can verify that indeed what you wrote down is actually what you have. Previous 3 months of statements for checking and savings accounts. How many of you have ever asked for this? You guys have been to class before. Why would we ask for this? This is asking for line item of 3 months of your past checking and savings statements. Would you want to give this to me? These are not rhetorical questions.
I would if I was moving into that place.
So a lot of people are like, I don't want to give you my checking account. I don't need you to see what I'm spending money on. And I'm like, well, I'm trying to verify that you're an amazing tenant, right? And in order for me to do that, I need to make sure that there's no alimony or other things that you haven't mentioned that would preclude you from being able to pay rent on time every month. So some people, I had one guy who was really reluctant to give them to me, and he kind of was blushing when he gave them to me, and I was like, I don't know what you're blushing about. And then I went home, and he had a bunch of charges that were all for the same place, and I didn't know what it was. And so I searched for it online, and it might be what you think it was, and sure enough, it was a strip club, right? And I was like, okay, well, you know, at least it wasn't out like smoking meth. I don't know how I would tell that he was doing that, but that's why, right? And so, you know, you run into stuff like that. And then your latest W-2 to prove your employment and to prove your income, along with 2 months of pay stubs. If you're self-employed, I need 2 years of tax returns. Sign date, and this is for me to fill out when I get your application. Royce.
Just a quick comment on the 30. If you use this page, the $30, at least for me, I use TransUnion's My Smart Move. It's like $40 now for it. I don't even collect it. I actually have them pay directly through the service when we get to that point. But yeah, make sure that you're not going out of pocket to run an application.
Yeah. So I use MrLandlord.com, and I can run credit without having a tenant have to approve. So the way Royce does it is he says, hey, you want to rent my place? Here's a link. Go out. You pay for it. And then what you do is you say, I give Royce permission to pull my credit, and then he gets to pull your credit. What I can do is you hand me your application, I type in your information, I have your credit 1 minute later, right? It's instant. And the way you do that is you can go out to Mr. Landlord and fill out an application, and someone will come to your house and interview you and make sure that your computer is secure, your filing cabinet is secure, you have locks on your house. It was a very strange interview. It was like a 65, 70-year-old woman who came to interview me who didn't really understand what she was doing. They were just paying her $20 to go do this interview, right? And so the questions on the sheet are, some of them are crazy, right? Like I'm running a real estate business, and she's like, do any of your activities involve, sex? And I was like, what? Like, no. And so like she started to get the picture, and she'd get to one, she'd be like, I'm just gonna put no. And she stopped reading them and just answered them for me. It's pretty entertaining. So how do we receive an application? Offer to pick it up. Hey, I have your application. Great. Where do you live? I'll be by right now. Why do we do that? Because we don't give them time to clean their current place. We want to see how they currently live. So go meet their pets, right? I meet all the pets before they move into my units. How is the cleanliness? Is the outside of their current unit maintained if they're responsible for it? Did they meet you outside and close the door? This is like one of the most telling signs of someone who is likely going to fail my application. You like start walking up to the property from your car, and they like come out and they close the door behind them, and they're like, hey, here's my application. And I'm like, it's 40 degrees out here. Why are we out here? Like, let's go inside. Oh, my mom's sleeping. All right, well, I have an hour drive. I really have to use the bathroom. Can I use your bathroom? Because we want to know, is that what the inside of the unit looks like? Right? We don't want this in our unit. And you might be like, man, Brian, you are over the top extreme. But yeah, you're protecting a $300,000+ investment. You should be kicking the tires on tenants the best you can in every way possible. Get the application and get the fee. Sometimes they pay me in cash. For this, I make an exception. Because like cashier's check for $30, meh. And by the way, the service, Mr. Landlord, is like $24.99. So you're getting robbed. Review the application and any additional information they provide. This is your opportunity while you're paying, while they're in person, where you can flip through and go, you didn't fill out your bank accounts. I need you to do that, right? This is your chance to really do that in person. And if there's a whole bunch of stuff that's there, just be like, you really need to fill the rest of this out. I can't process it like this. So that's all I have on that. So before you begin actually processing the application, I think I'm making up time, but it's still going to run long. So this is the rental application evaluation criteria that I put together for class. Last time, it's 5 pages long. It basically is a starting point for you guys. If you don't have written criteria, you need written criteria. Why? Because if someone ever decides, oh, he discriminated against me, you want to be able to pull this out and go, this is the application they gave me. Here's my written criteria that I've used on every application that I've ever got. And this is why they failed. Boom. I'm like, I can literally open my filing cabinet drawer, pull this out along with an entire folder of all the applications I've ever processed, and be like, have fun, HUD, or whoever's at my door trying to, deal with this complaint. I'm like, they're all consistent. So be consistent, have criteria. But you have to go update this for your own needs, and you have to have it reviewed by your own attorney, right? This is a starting point. It is not a final point. I'm not liable for your inability to go and add your own criteria and have your attorney review it. Michelle.
Using the example of, say you go to their house and they won't let you inside, is that a written criteria? Can you use that as a reason, or can they then turn around and say, hey, I met all the written criteria, but you didn't run it to me because I wouldn't let you in my house?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. That's where you need to write that down and ask your attorney if that's legit. So I don't have that written down. Most of the time, you're going to find that the person who closes the door behind them likely won't pass 90% of the other criteria on your sheet anyway. So it's likely not a problem. But I don't know the answer to that question because I'm not an attorney.
Well, and kind of on the same line as well, like you have the questions about how long do you intend on staying on the property. Let's say I have 2 people applying pretty much at the same time. One says, I want to stay there 5 years. The other one says, I'm only going to be here maximum, a year.
So how do 2 people apply at the same exact time? How is that possible?
And that was part of my question. Then do you just go with the first person?
First come, first served. And this is why. If you go, I got 2 applications. I got one 5 minutes ago, and I got this one just now. And you go, oh, this guy makes 100,000. This guy makes 60. Oh, this guy works at some nice place, and this guy works at KFC. You are discriminating in your own mind based on could be their name, right? You don't know. And so you're not following your criteria. The only way you can be fair is first application in is the first one you process. And I think when you tell tenants this, prospective tenants this, when they're walking through the property, they appreciate it, right? Hey, first one in is the first one I process. If it passes, they've got 24 hours to put the deposit down. If it doesn't, I'm moving on. And if it's an incomplete application, then I'm passing, right? But don't be like, oh, well, he didn't check that one box, so it's incomplete. And I know I wanted this other person to rent. Because a lot of times when you do that, you're likely going to get the worst tenant because your mind is just evaluating it based on things you see in a split second, right? I don't know that that's going to work out in your favor. So first come, first serve, avoid discrimination.
But if it's strictly first come, first serve, then why ask those questions if you can't use them anyway?
Which question?
Well, like, how long do you intend to stay on the property? Or have you
If somebody tells me on the phone, I'm only going to stay for 6 months, I'm like, I'm sorry, we only do 1-year leases, right? Yeah. I'm looking for things on the phone to rule them out, to make sure they're going to at least pass that initial set of questions so that I make sure it's worth my time to show up for them, right? So yeah, while I'd prefer to have somebody rent for 2 to 3 years, even people that say they're going to rent for 2 to 3 years, they're only signing a 1-year lease. They might move out. I've had somebody who moved in for 1 year and 7 years later or whatever it is, they're still there. I thought they'd be gone 6 years ago. You just don't know what's going to happen in people's lives. Have objective criteria. This is not a time to be subjective. Don't get yourself in trouble. Know your federal and local laws. Fair Housing Act, federal, 3 unrelated rules, City of Fort Collins, right? Lead-based paint stuff, all of those things. Like, know those. Process the completed applications in the order you receive them, and don't collect and pick the best. So we talked about that. Fair Housing Act. Says the landlord can't refuse to rent housing, negotiate for housing, or make housing unavailable, deny a dwelling, or set different terms, conditions, or privileges, provide different housing services or facilities, falsely deny that housing is available, for profit persuade owners to sell or rent. We don't really need to cover that one. Deny anyone access to or membership in a facility or service related to the sale or rental of housing based on any of the following: race, color, national origin, religion, sex, familial status, or handicap. Do not discriminate. There are people whose jobs it is to call and say, have an African American sounding voice and an African American name, and say, is this unit still available for rent? And you say no, and then 20 minutes later, someone with a Caucasian voice calls and says, is this unit still available for rent? And they say yes. Guess what? You're in a lot of trouble. Don't mess around with this stuff. You shouldn't be discriminating in any form or fashion. What about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender? It is not protected under this, but it is still likely protected. Do not discriminate. A note about alcohol and drug use that will probably blow your mind if you haven't seen it before. Fair Housing Act prohibits discrimination in housing on the basis of disability. Why are we talking about disability, Brian? You said this was about alcohol and drugs. A disability is defined as a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more of a person's major life activities. This definition covers people recovering from alcoholism or drug addiction. Individuals who have successfully completed a drug treatment program are protected. Hello, protected under the disability provisions of the Fair Housing Act. You cannot, as a landlord, refuse to rent to you solely because of a history of drug addiction since you are in recovery. Your history of abusing drugs in the past may not be an accurate measure of your current ability to be a good tenant. However, the law does not protect people who are currently using illegal drugs or people who cause a direct threat to the health or safety of others. The challenge is that the prior drug use resulted in a criminal conviction.
No, I was just, can you drug test tenants?
No, I don't think
Right.
so. Right. So, yeah, like I listened to the recording of this class from last time. You literally are right on pace with your last time's questions. Like,
No, I'm making it.
I tried to add some to the slide. I added all of James's so far to the slide. So he's like, I don't have any questions to ask.
Well, I
Yeah,
was thinking the same thing.
we got a couple questions over here.
Yeah, I was just thinking the same thing about whether or not you can drug test tenants,
No.
primarily because of the last bullet there.
Yeah, you can't, right? But how do you know if they're using illegal
You
drugs?
offer them Coke if they take it and do it in front of you. That's enough.
Duly noted. I'll add that to the slide for next time. Yeah.
How does this come up in the interview process? Is this something you ask about? Or
Well, if
did
they have a
bring it up?
conviction, right?
Right.
You know, or you search online, right? One of the things I do during the application or during the processing part is that I search them online, right? So you will sometimes search. I had an applicant I searched, and the first thing that popped up, and it had a picture, and it was an article from out of state, and sure enough, intent to distribute meth. That's what he was arrested for, out of state. Well, guess what? That falls off my approval, right? So.
Could you ask, if you're calling employers, could you ask the results of drug testing? that
You
came
can
back
ask
with
whatever
this?
you want. They're going to tell you no way. Yeah.
How much information are they willing to give you? Oh, yeah. How much information are they willing to give you? Have you had employers that refuse to give you any
Yeah, so a
info?
lot of employers now have what's the number called? You call 1-800 number, but you need a membership, and I hate these. The work number or whatever it is. And so for those, like, I try and call the actual company, and they're like, well, you need to call the work number. And I'm like, look, I just need to know if he still works there, and can you validate this? And I like use smooth talk them, right? And some people just shut you down, but other people have loose lips, right? All over the place, right? Blah, blah, I'm not supposed to tell you this, you know, blah, blah. This is how much they make. They've been here for 7 years, you know, blah, blah, blah. So ask questions, and hopefully you get the answers, but you're doing your best to get the answers so that you can validate what they told you, right?
I heard a rumor one of the larger property management companies in this town is no longer giving landlord references.
Yep. And so sometimes you'll call a landlord and they won't give you a reference anymore, which sucks, right? So then you kind of gotta like call them and sweet talk them, right? And I've had a landlord, a property manager, literally drop, and it saved me a ton of headache because the application looked good. There was just this one weird thing with this one landlord, and I called him, and she was like, I can't really, you know, email you what happened. And so I called her, and she just like 15-minute story. And I was like, whoo, thanks for telling me that. And I went and validated it all. And then I was like, yeah, you're declined. You lied on your application amongst lots of other bad things. So.
Yeah, and with the work number, I've definitely pushed back on tenants and asked them, can you give me a supervisor's name and
Right.
number
And go tell them you need to talk to me.
Yeah, because the work numbers tells you nothing.
Yeah, well, and it costs money,
Yeah.
right? So it'll tell you like, yes, they work there and their salary is this or something like that. So back to the disability. If you or someone associated with you have a physical or mental disability, including hearing, mobility, and visual, chronic alcoholism, chronic mental illness, AIDS, age-related complex, mental retardation that substantially limits one or more major life activities, have a record of such a disability or are regarded as having such a disability, the landlord may not refuse to let you make reasonable accommodations to the property, right? Do you have to like tear down walls? No. But hey, I need to add, you know, a small ramp for the one step that's in the living room because I'm in a wheelchair. That's okay, as long as it's removable when they leave. You can't refuse to make reasonable accommodations in rules, policies, or practices for that disabled person. However, housing need not be made available to a person who is a direct threat to the health or safety of others or who's currently using illegal drugs. Section 8, we covered what this is. Applicants must earn about 50%, less than 50% of the area median income. It's guaranteed rent from the government. So that's amazing. Every month you get a guaranteed rent check from the government. Although I don't even know what happened in the government shutdown.
They stopped paying.
Yeah, so that's awesome. During the government shutdown, no more payment. The voucher has a maximum payment. It's calculated based on utilities and every other thing that the tenant will need to pay. However, Section 8 in our market is really hard, which is why you get people lying to get in front of you in person to see what they would call it is, do you have a heart, right? Will you please lower your rent? Can you please have a heart? You know, my family of 7 people. And it's like, it's a business, right? No, I can't do that. So screen these tenants just like you would anyone else, except for the fact that you know they can pay rent, so their income doesn't matter. Have a written process for that difference. Here's what the sheet looks like or used to look like. So basically they go, oh, you're gonna live in a duplex, it's 3-bedroom, here's what it's got electric heat, it's got electric baseboard, and blah, 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 and they circle it and they come up with a number. That's an old sheet, so. Service animals, a discussion that isn't gonna take very long because there's nothing really solid on this. Other than, well, there's solid stuff on service animals, but there's not solid stuff on ESDs and therapy dogs. So the problem is, this is a picture from a website where I could literally go and pay $60 and my dog could be an emotional support animal tomorrow, right? This is a problem. And you see people online like taking pictures with the like no animals and they've got their dog with their little emotional support thing. Those people are probably not legit, right? But it's really difficult to do anything about it, right? Gives individuals the right to live with their emotional support dog regardless of any building or residences with a no pet policy. What? Like, so an apartment with a no dog complex, I need an emotional support dog, I can live there with my dog. This creates all sorts of problems. Now, you're in Denver where pit bulls aren't allowed, or at least they didn't used to be, I don't know if they are still, but you're gonna go to Denver with your pit bull and live in a no dog apartment complex with your pit bull that's not allowed by the city of Denver.
Or your insurance. Or your insurance.
Oh.
So, who wins?
The disability.
We don't know.
Disability.
As of now, yes, because you're not gonna, you don't wanna fight the FHAA. But there's cases that are gonna go to court for this, right? So we're awaiting the outcome. I don't have a lot of new stuff. Here's a little bit more. A service animal under Colorado law can be a dog or a miniature horse. There's a long-standing joke that James and I are gonna get service miniature horses and go to Red Robin. Because they allow service animals. It'll be awesome if we all have miniature horses and go there for dinner. It will be amazing. That video will go viral so fast. These animals do work and perform tasks for the benefit of an individual. And so, all joking aside, service animals and emotional support animals are real and they're needed. I'm not at all taking that away from anyone for any reason. Examples might be a guide dog for a blind person, et cetera, et cetera. Assistance animals are animals that contribute to a person's emotional support, well-being, comfort, and companionship. The person who's claiming the animal is necessary only needs to provide a letter from their medical professional, which you can request. Must be at least within the last 12 months, I believe, and advising that that's required because of a disability. You can only ask the following 2 questions. Be very careful here. Is the dog a service animal required because of a disability? Yes or no? What task is the dog trained to perform? Do not ask, what is your disability? Get yourself in a bunch of hot water. All right, step 9, processing the application. Got a question right here. Thanks for letting me take a drink of water.
So if the service animal is aggressive, you still have to take it?
As of now, yes.
Okay.
This is the whole, like, they kind of thought through, like, service animals are needed. Yeah, they should be allowed even when they're not. But then it's like, what if it's, like, being taken advantage of? And, yeah, it's a huge issue. And property managers don't know what to do about it. Like, my property manager and I, every time we see an article, we kind of send them back and forth. And we haven't seen many lately. So we're just waiting on the courts to figure this stuff out. So this is the second to the last section. The last section is like 1 slide. So this is the kind of second part of the meat. Like I said, we're going to run a little long. If you need to leave, I won't be offended. James probably will. I'm just kidding. So they fill out the application. They gave it to you. And literally, we're walking down from the top. So Easy. Applicant, we're filling this in, right? The tenant doesn't see this. Tenant desired occupancy. 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So for me, it's got to obviously be 1 year. If desired occupancy is 2 or 3, that's great. It's literally pass or fail for me, right? I used to have a 10-point scale that tried to like do whatever, but now it's pass or fail. And inside this criteria, so tenant occupancy, a pass is given if their desired occupancy is at least as long as my desired occupancy. Otherwise, it's a disqualification, and we're done. You get disqualified, we're done, right? Communicate the results. Income requirements, right? So there's a whole section in here, says basically what you need. You know, pass any of the following: 3 times rent amount as income on their own, or 3 times the rent with their other applicants, right? 3 people are going to live in the place, and they all add up to have 3 times the rent. That's fine.
And for the recording, Brian is referencing sheets, and those sheets are available on the website, so if you guys need them.
Right, and then in here, if they don't meet those requirements, there are some adjustments. So you could adjust, hey, they don't have 3x, what could they do? They could get a cosigner as someone to basically say, yeah, if they don't make their payments, I'm willing to make the payments for them, right? And there's other options in here. Current employer, right? And we're going to verify this income, right? This is just their stated income on their application. Does it pass? And then we're still going to verify actually how much do they make right here with the employer. We're calling the employer and we're asking them, hey, you know, how long has this person been on the job? What is their current income? And a lot of people will have jobs where it's certain set of normal hours and then they're getting paid overtime. A lot of the oil field workers, right? It's, hey, 40 hours a week and I make $60K a year, but I'm really making $180K a year right now because of all the overtime. Okay, but you really make $60K. You just have a lot of overtime. So you need to be careful. Is this salary hourly? Is it salary? Is it bonus and commission? Is it overtime? Ask those questions, right? Are you the supervisor? I actually go online, look up the company's name, and call the main number and ask for a supervisor. That way I know I'm not calling their buddy who's trained to, yeah, hello, this is, you know, John Deere. Yes, he works here, right? You can get duped. People do this, right? Call the number that you know is the company, ask for the supervisor, and then ask the supervisor, are you their direct supervisor? What role do they perform for you, right? Find out. Are they reliable? How's their quality of their work? Right? Why are you asking this crap, Brian? Because I want to know, are they going to pay my rent on time or not, right? If they're a good quality worker, they show up on time for work every day, chances are they'll probably pay their rent on time. More likely, right? And then I ask, hey, if this person didn't work for you right now, would you rehire them for their current role? And you will either get, yes, absolutely, they're great, or you will get no, and then you get to ask, well, okay, why not? And a lot of times it'll just be, you know, they're not a fit for the role, or they don't, you know, do well with customers or whatever, and that doesn't necessarily impact my decision, but sometimes you'll get a no that they don't want to tell you why. And then I pry and try and sweet talk them and find out what's really going on. So I'm doing that with the current employer and the previous employer, and then the previous employer from that as well, until I've got at least 5 years of employment history. And again, it's in this sheet, you'll see like pass all of the following. Current employer must be able to contact it, right? Employment and pay are verified, right? Don't forget to ask, is it full-time, part-time, right? All this stuff is written down for you. This is like, I wish I would have had this, right? Because I basically developed this from screening lots of tenants and figuring out, oh, I should have asked that. Next thing up, landlord. So we talked about already the questions we're going to call and ask, right? What are you going to ask a current or previous landlord of a tenant? Would you rent to them again? Excellent question. I usually save that for the last thing, but would you rent to them again? And some of them will be, their answer will be very tricky, and they will say if they qualified again on their application, right? Which is more often the answer I'm getting, which is probably the correct answer because they don't know if things have changed with that tenant, right? What else are you going to ask them? Are they on time with their rent? How many times has rent been late? Right? What actual rent do they pay? Right? A lot of times you'll call and be like, hey, you know, I'm calling about James Orr. He lives at, you know, 1234 Main Street. And they'll be like, he's not on the lease. We don't have any record of him. What does that mean? Means he's living there without being on the lease, and the current landlord doesn't know he's there. Yep, not good. So, how is their housekeeping? Have you been in the unit? Did they have any damages? Have they had any complaints from anyone? Right? Have you had any issues with them? Have they taken care of the yard? Do they have pets? If so, how many? Right? Ask all these things. When did they start renting? For previous landlords, when did they rent to and from? Right? Validate that this information matches what they gave you on their application. If it doesn't, something's wrong. Dig until you find out what it is. Don't just go, oh yeah, those dates are off by a year, whatever. No, that means something's missing. And if the dates on their application are like, 2017 in May to 2018 in May, and then it's May 2015 to May 2016, and there's a year missing, or even a month missing, no. You go back to them and you say, I need the full history. Where did you live for that month? Right? I don't care if it was with a friend or on a couch or at your parents'. I need to know where you were. Otherwise, they don't have your complete history. Any questions on landlords? Awesome. Credit report. So I typically wait to pull this until the very end. I know some landlords, it's the very first thing they pull, because if the credit doesn't pass their test, then they can just not do any of the other work. But I like to save my prospective tenants their $30. I don't know. Just a nice guy in that way. So you're going to verify, have they had evictions, right? My Mr. Landlord report runs credit, criminal, and eviction check. So I can see, have they been evicted? Yes or no? Hopefully no. Do they have any collections, right? As you look at their credit report, in most cases you'll see a bunch of green circles for payment on time for each account. When you start seeing yellow ones, you've got 30-day lates. When you start seeing red ones, it's 90 or 120 days late. So in the criteria, you need to figure out what is acceptable to you, right? You need to verify their name and social security number match. I have had cases where the social security number did not match, and it was still legit. Stuff gets mistaken on credit reports. Address history comes on the credit report. Are the addresses that they gave you, at least all the ones that you see on the credit report, are they part of the ones they gave you? And if not, ask them, hey, what is this address? Also, when you get a copy of their ID, look at the address on the ID. Is it listed on the places they gave you that they lived? If not, ask them, when did you live there? Right? A lot of times on your credit report, like if you pulled my credit report, it would show that I lived at 1118 8th Avenue in Eldora, Iowa. Yeah, when I was in elementary school, right? But that's okay. And they just tell you that that's my parents' address, right? No big deal. And you move on. What? Was a fake address. Yeah. So ask all these things. Sorry, credit. Social security verification, address history, collections. Collections will show up, and they will show up as, hey, this person has an outstanding balance of this. A lot of the times, they're medical collections, right? And so medical stuff is really tough. Like you can have, if you got cancer and you didn't have the right insurance, you could have tens of thousands of dollars of medical collections. That does not usually sway me from renting to someone, right? Collections that are for credit cards, your car, utility accounts, other landlords from an eviction, those have much higher weight with me.
If you're going to do that, you should have it in your written criteria.
Yes. Document all of that in here. So like in here right now, it says, no late payments in the past 12 months and no more than 3 30-day lates in the last 3 years. If a one-time medical or other life event caused credit issues and was discussed prior to processing of the application or noted on the application, this can be accepted. If this happened more than once, it's a disqualification. Again, these are the criteria that I used. You need to make them fit for you. Debt to income ratio. So this is essentially what banks use to figure out, hey, this is how much debt you have and this is how much income you have coming in. And if you have a really high debt to income ratio, it makes it very hard for you to pay for things. So you can look in the criteria and learn more about that. Online search results. We kind of already talked about this. Go search for their name online. Look on Facebook, look on Twitter, look on Instagram, look wherever you can look. Do a wide Google search. Figure out, are they criminals in another state trying to sell meth? Right? One search can save you having to do a meth remediation. James says yes.
No, I was talking about the murderer.
Oh, yeah. So in another case, my web search turned up that a person that tried, I met him at the property, showed him the house. He tried to rent from me, and he was like, had defrauded someone, and someone in his family had killed someone else. Like the whole family was like a crime syndicate, basically, just in their family. And it was like one web search turned it up, right? And it made it really, really easy. So don't skip that step. Perfect. It's working again. So bank name and checking account, right? You've got their bank statements. Go through them line by line. Have they paid their rent each month, right? Now you get to see, yep, they paid their rent. Have they paid their other bills? Did they have any overdrafts? Did they have any non-sufficient funds? Return checks? Look for all of those things, right? Did they provide investment account balance? So there are cases where someone can have no income, but they can have very high checking and savings account balances or investment account balances, and I would still rent to them, right? Just because you don't have current income, right? This particular person was an educator, and they had moved from another town. It was the middle of the school year, and they couldn't apply for jobs until, except for substituting, until the next fall. So, you know, they showed me, yeah, I have this many thousands of dollars. I can easily pay rent for, you know, the whole year. And that was enough. So everything else checked out too. Reference name, phone. So I'm going to write down the references, they gave me, and their phone number, and I'm going to call them. And I'm going to ask them, how do you know this person? How long have you known this person? Right? And if the answer is 3 months, I'm disregarding almost everything else they say. Right? But hey, I've been friends with them for 20 years. You know, I grew up with them, you know, in high school. You know, we roomed together for a while. Ask open-ended questions and let them talk. Don't interrupt them. This is your chance to just have their friends tell you everything about them to help them get into a rental, right? So, how do you know them? How long have you known them? Have you been in their house? And if so, how's their housekeeping and cleanliness, right? And some people are like, oh, he's immaculate. And some people are like, he's a guy. He's not very good, right? It just depends on who you get. And then the last question I'm going to ask them is, if you had a property that was available for rent, would you rent it to them? And then after that, I actually ask them, is there anything else you'd like me to know? And some people, this is a 2-minute conversation, and for some people, this is a half-an-hour conversation. I would let them talk. Trust and overall impression. So trust sounds like a really subjective word. However, to me, this is, did their application match what you found out? Did they tell you everything up front about what you were going to find on their credit report or everything else? And then, what did the current resident, if you visited their house, look like? What was your pet visit like? So all of those things you need to go through. The very first time I screened a tenant and I didn't have any of this and I was just going through it, it was very difficult. It probably took me like 4 hours just trying to get through screening one tenant and figuring it out. Now this process is probably like, if everyone would answer their phone, 20 minutes, unless you get a talker. And then it's however long they talk. So we got a question back there, James. Offer declined.
Have you ever had a tenant harass you that you turned down, and how did you handle it?
Let me think. I've had tenants I've put in a property harass me in certain ways. But not really bad. There's definitely been phone calls, especially about the felony thing, where, you know, people get really angry. You know, they're just tired of hearing no, right? And I think from a, you know, legitimate standpoint, if their felony was 14 years ago and it was, you know, I wrote a bad check and it got cashed and I'm a totally different person now, you know, I haven't done anything since, I can understand why they'd be angry. Right? It's like, oh, I'm legitimately trying to rent this place for my family and no one will rent to me because I have something stupid I did when I was 18, right? So you get some of that, but really I try to let people, and you'll see this I think on the next slide, I try to let people self-elect and out, right? Like, oh, you didn't fill out your application, and I send back, I process the application and then I'm like, here's 10 questions I need answers to. A lot of people are just like, I'm done with this guy, right? And I'm like, that's fine. You can be done with me because you probably weren't renting anyway, right? I did have a situation where it was a man and a woman, they were boyfriend, girlfriend, moved into a place, and then I don't know what happened. There was some trauma, but I think he was still, I'm not sure if he was married or divorced, it's unclear. And she moved out, and then his wife or ex-wife moved back in, and I found out about it, and I was like, she's gonna need to apply and be on the lease. Well, she didn't pass the application process. And so then I have a very weird situation, right? I know she's gonna be there, but I can't add her to the lease because she had an eviction. And I can't violate my own criteria to make an exception. And so you run into weird situations like that, right? And in the end, I knew they were moving out in 3 months, and he'd taken really good care of the property, and I knew she was gonna be there, and the lease basically said, you can have a guest for up to 2 weeks. And so I told him, you can have a guest for up to 2 weeks, and then she needs to go somewhere else for a night and come back, right? I doubt that happened, but there are weird situations where you're like, if I'm like, no, she can't be there, and I check every day, I'm gonna have a problem tenant, right? And the guy's gonna take a sledgehammer to the property and leave, right? So what if it's close, right? It depends on why it's close. I don't have enough money for deposit and first full month's rent. What do we do? Bingo, pass, right? We do not do installment plans for first month's rent or damage deposit, not ever. First full month's rent, they move in on the 15th, they pay a full month of rent, and the next month is prorated. I just convinced my property manager to make this change. I've been on them for a couple years. They've implemented it this year, which is awesome. Moving to town yet? I don't have a job. Okay, well, do you have some backup income? Do you have a cosigner that can sign for you that says, hey, I'm gonna pay rent in case he doesn't? Can we do a higher security deposit? Can you you could say, well, how long do you think it's gonna take you to get a job? Can you prepay 3 months of rent? I don't particularly like prepaid rent like that. I would much rather have somebody cosign than I have someone else on the hook. Income doesn't match 3 times rent. Again, cosigner, consider higher security deposit. All of this stuff is listed as options, and they're not the only ones, right? Again, I can't encourage you enough. Take the document and make it your own, right? Use it as a starting point. I have no rental history. We live in a college town. People graduate from college, and they've lived in dorms, right? They don't have any rental history. They need someone to give them that chance, right? Great. Higher deposit, maybe you need a cosigner. Credit issues, higher deposit, maybe a cosigner, maybe both. Right? You need to figure out what would work for you based on the situation. A lot of times people are willing to pay as much as 3 times security deposit because they know that if they move in and they do really well and take care of the property, that when they move out, they're gonna have a great landlord recommendation from me. And now they've kind of overcome their problem one more step. And if they can do that again, now their past 2 landlords are saying, yeah, he was great. They're not gonna need that again, right? They're moving past their problems. Last step, communicate the results. If they were denied, communicate appropriately. If their denial is due to their credit, you must, this is not optional, you must send a letter. I would email them, and then I would send them certified mail where you get a signature back. But if possible, like I said, let them disqualify themselves. If you're asking for information and they're not giving it, great, then they're choosing not to complete their application. Move to the next application. If they're accepted, call or email with the good news. Be happy, right? No, hey, congratulations, you're approved. No, like this is a great thing. They're about to move into your property. You want them to be stoked. Send the lease agreement for them to review prior to signing. I don't send my lease agreement until here. If people ask for it, occasionally I would send it. And when you get to this point, if someone reads the lease agreement and wants you to change something, your answer, in my opinion, should be no. My lease is my lease. Take it or leave it. And I lost a tenant due to that. They were like, well, we don't like this section and this section. Can you change? And I'm like, no. Like, that's my lease. Like, I've rented to lots of people. This is how it is. And they didn't like it, so they left. And turns out it was probably a really good thing, right? I think they would have ended up being a tenant who looks great on paper, but then any little thing that goes wrong, it becomes a huge issue with them. So, because they were really nitpicking on the lease. Collect your reservation deposit, remove your advertising once you have this deposit, right? It's their unit. Schedule your lease signing, sit down and walk through that with them. So in summary, write down your process. You've got a huge head start tonight. Decide on your criteria, your pre-screening questions. Have them available. Mine are literally on a digital sticky note on the desktop of my computer, so if I ever get a tenant call, I just minimize everything else and my questions are right there. Boom, I don't have to think about it. Start at least 60 days in advance, walk the property, make plans for anything that needs to be done, start advertising at your highest rent that you think you can get. Take calls, pre-screen, do the showings, process the applications in the order you receive them, as we discussed. Please do not settle just to get your place rented. This is the huge, huge mistake that you can make. Right? If you just lower your rent $50 a month and get a qualified tenant in your property, what did that cost you in a year? 50 times 12, $600, right? How much does it cost to put a bad tenant in and have to evict them? The attorney fee by itself is $600 or more. Not to mention the damage and the vacancy and all that. Don't settle. Communicate your results, get your deposit, sign your lease, and then schedule and perform needed rent work once your old tenant moves out, before your new tenant moves in. And what are we here to do? Take checks to the bank. So that is it. Sorry, we went over a little bit. Questions, we're here to take them. Denise has a question.
Talk a little bit about bankruptcy.
Talk a little bit about bankruptcy. In what particular scenario?
Just, well, it's on the application if they filed bankruptcy in the
So,
past.
From a bankruptcy standpoint, I don't particularly care. I care, can you pay the rent? What's going on? Are you upfront about the bankruptcy, right? If I pull your credit and I find all sorts of stuff and you didn't tell me, you're going to probably be disqualified, right? It's based on my criteria. So if you have a bankruptcy and you're like, yeah, I had a bankruptcy, it's over, oh yeah, then it's really not a big deal, right? Stuff happens to people. So, Royce, you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we will definitely work with tenants who have bankruptcies, but I use it as an indicator to dig deeper into their credit. So if we start to see the same patterns emerge again after a bankruptcy, it's likely something we're going to try to avoid as much as possible.
Yeah, like a lot of the times they will tell you, hey, I had a life event, it was a divorce. You'll see all the credit cards go 120 days late, and then before that, it's all green, and after that, it's all green. I look at that and I go, you went through a divorce. Shit hit the fan, I get it. You're excused, basically. Now, that happens here, and then here, and then here, it's a no, right? Like if it's a recurring pattern, then no. So, other questions?
Wait.
Time out.
If you do have a disabled tenant and you can't ask them what disability they have, you can ask them what accommodations they might need, right?
So hopefully they will tell you, right? The two questions that you're technically allowed to ask were up there, right? And if they need an accommodation, they should ask for it, right?
But you can't ask them. You can ask them, though.
I don't know the answer to that. So you should ask an attorney, but you definitely can't ask what the disability is. So when you start asking, what accommodations do you need? I could easily see somebody thinking you're trying to find out what their disability is, right? So I would avoid asking that question. If someone wants to rent your unit and they need an accommodation, in my opinion, it's their responsibility to come to you and say, I need a ramp in the kitchen. Great, you're responsible for installing it and removing it, go for it.
Agreed.
And
They'll
document it.
They'll tell you.
Yeah.
Which website is the criteria on?
James.
That's a question for me. You have to email me because I don't know where it is, and I didn't think to look it up ahead of time.
Can you put it in can you have Holly send it out as a part of the next or something like that?
Yeah, maybe we'll do something like that.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah, if you're listening to recording especially, email me and I'll try to figure out where it is. Any other questions?
Perfect. So I cleaned off my bookcase this week.
Let's end the recording, but
Oh,
stick
yeah.
around for free gifts.
Yeah, stick around for free gifts. Do you want to end the recording?
Yeah.
I'll just turn this off.